What is up, everybody? This is Deshaun Barros with the Politically Incorrect Podcast, and I'm here with my co-host, Matt.
Welcome, PI Nation.
And Evaldo.
Everybody, happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day, everybody. And I hope you're having a blessed Sunday. So today we got a few interesting topics we want to talk about, but the first one we want to talk about is culture and how culture can leave a lasting impressions on different types of groups, nations, societies of people, and how people can categorize people based off of certain pattern behaviors within a culture. So I have recently just got back from a trip, a vacation, and one of the things that I've noticed was that culture definitely precedes you. So your culture and your identity as a group of people, regardless of what group or what racial ethnic background you come from, your culture will precede you. And what I mean is that when you go somewhere that doesn't have many people like you or people who look like you, in many cases, is that there's a stigma or a stereotype based off the person or who you look like or where you're from and things of that nature. And that's all based off of your culture and what your group of people is presenting or representing towards the world. So I just want my co-host to maybe comment on some of these of the point I'm making in this topic, and I want us to really begin to discuss how culture can affect not only politics but even commerce and your finances and things like that. So what do you guys think about this as a whole? Maybe we'll start off with Evaldo.
Yeah, I think culture affects us in a lot of different ways. Definitely commerce, money. It affects pretty much every type of area you may try to live your life in. Um, and the Greek culture is actually pretty fascinating. They had a strong culture that influenced a lot of people back in the days where they reigned under Alexander the Great. And even if you look at like the Bible, the whole New Testament was pretty much written in Greek. That was a pretty common language back then, and they influenced a lot of cultures, and they were a big influence back then.
Yeah, and he's specifically talking about Greece because I actually came from a trip from Greece, off vacation. So I got to go visit the Parthenon and some of the pagan temples that they built for their gods back in the ancient times. And it was fascinating the amount of architectural design and mathematical proportions that even engineers today can't even understand how they engineered such buildings back in those times. So it's just fascinating, the Greek culture and how they put their buildings together, not only archaeological, because if you even look in the United States, a lot of our a lot of our main federal buildings, a lot of these old historical Senate, state houses, and things of that nature all have Greek influences as far as the what's a good word for one of the most famous or one of the most revered architectural designs that everybody takes from the Greeks are the columns, the columns of the buildings that hold up or support not only the roof but the very entrance when you enter a building, especially historical Senate, state houses, and things of that nature. You'll see that they not only have the dome but they have the columns there. So those architectural designs have definitely influenced every part of the world. So not only that, but through democracy, through commerce, and literature and things of that nature, Greek has been such a pivotal culture in what they've contributed to the world. So Matt, I want to open this up to you, and maybe you can describe how culture can really affect our political sphere, and not only that, our commerce. So what are your thoughts, Matt?
Well, obviously, culture is the backbone of what makes up a nation. In the United States, we're blessed because we have a mixture of so many different cultures. When we talk about Greece, Greece is obviously very important historically because of their contributions to man, their contributions to democracy, the sciences, the medical sciences. They helped pioneer a lot of what we look at today, and they were also, the Romans actually took a lot from them as well. So Greece culture in general is just, historically is very important. But it's also one of tragedy as well, because here is a nation uh, that now has a variety of cultures because they've been conquered throughout history. Evaldo mentioned Alexander the Great. He was their first great um, empire builder at a very young age. Unfortunately, he died at a very young age before the Greek Empire could really take off, which fractured it into smaller nations as his generals fought over who would be in control. Um, but they would eventually be conquered by the Romans. They would be conquered by the Ottomans. They would be conquered by the Allies, pretty much pushed over, you would say, during World War One.
They were also conquered by the Christians as well.
And then they were eventually conquered by the Nazis. So this has been a culture that has been through ups and downs. They've been one of the superpowers of the world, but then now you look at them today, and you could say on one end of the spectrum they're a little bit defeated because of now they're in extreme debt. Now they're in extreme austerity measures.
Yeah,
And you may not see that stuff in the tourist sections, but the people that are
living
uh,
there.
actually, trying to make a day to day life living there, they're the ones that are being affected by this.
Yeah.
And it's all because, not necessarily because their culture. It's interesting because when you go online and you try to research why Greece is in the position that it is, a lot of people say that it could be cultural because of them being lazy. Europeans tend to have a more relaxed lifestyle than say the average American would. It's not uncommon for noontime for shops to close so that people can go home and take a nap and things like that. It is a different culture, but I don't think that that's necessarily the downfall of Greece.
Yeah,
What ended up happening was socialism ended up taking hold there, and we see that's a common trend. Of anytime that socialism gains a foothold in any type of country or culture, or that mentality,
Yeah.
it just brings upon poverty and hurt for people.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I want to piggyback off what you said. You said it's amazing that the historical part of Greece pioneered so much for the world, and just like we said before, when you look at a society's culture and you can view it from a bird's eye view and see not only what it's contributed to the world, but what kind of lasting effect it's had on the world. I mean, I can tell you so much that the Greek culture has been so influential in literature. Not only the New Testament, they say that the New Testament was written in Greek, and that the Apostle Paul actually was the one that preached all over Greece. He preached. That was one of his mission trip. He was in Athens, then he went into Corinth. He went all throughout the Mediterranean preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. And really, why that's so significant to what I'm talking about here is because it contributed to the Christian religion. It contributed to the idea of bringing Christ to the entire world. And why that's important is because not only is the United States built off a Christian Judeo value system, but our culture here in the United States has been influenced by not only Greek culture but Christian culture, Judeo-Christian values that have built this nation and allowed this nation to thrive because of freedoms in which have been in place here in this country to allow people to thrive in capitalistic environments. I mean, you don't see countries like you said before, Matt, in socialistic environments, really using their human ingenuity at any level. They're actually wasting away due to the fact that their human ingenuity is crushed by the fact that somebody else is going to get their hard-earned money.
Right. Well, it's tough to want to be great or do great things if there's no incentive to do it.
Yeah,
So not saying that there aren't people out there that won't do something great for their country because they're socialists. But what made America so great, especially in the late 1800s and 1900s, and why there was such a spirit of invention throughout this nation and England as well at that time, was because people had the freedom um, to express themselves and to they felt like they could actually live the American dream, in which this was a place that they can come to where they could actually put their ideas together and build something, create something.
Yeah.
Capitalism tends to breed that type of thinking, whereas um, yeah, you can get some productivity, but if you look at like the Soviet Union and how they did it, it was pointing guns at their scientists and things like that. There wasn't
That's not a good idea.
it's not a good way to try to you know to get people to invent stuff. So that's why the Soviets were always second, not in everything, because they did manage to get some good German scientists to help them to get into outer space. But it is what it is.
What's your take on this, Evaldo? You've been quiet over there. What's up with you?
So we're talking about culture, right, and how it affects us in different areas of our lives. Where I was actually wondering, where do we get our democratic type of ways from? Is that who were those? Who were the ancient ones that thought of something like that? Was it Greece or
Well,
Rome?
yeah, I mean,
Well, Greece was the first to do
democracy.
democracy.
Yeah,
But what we have to understand is that we're not truly democratic. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. Um, so what I mean by that is we elect officials to do our bidding,
right.
but they may go against what we voted them to do. There's always that. Plus, we have checks and balances and things like that.
Yeah, our government is set up as far as our modern day government is democratic and such, but it's also a republic, like you said, Matt, in which we're one nation found on God, where God, as far as I'm concerned, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but a republic is based off the fact that not government isn't God, but we're backed by a belief or a system that's backed by God, that our rights come from God and not government. Is that am I explaining
Right.
that
Well,
correct?
and you see that in the Constitution.
Yeah.
The definite belief of God, or at least a being, a
Yeah.
higher power,
A superior being, yep.
is in the Constitution. So,
Yeah.
and the great thing about our forefathers, right? So think about this. George Washington actually had the opportunity to be a dictator or be the king, because after we won our independence, I don't know if they teach this in school or not, but
Yeah.
they actually offered Washington
Yes, they did.
the opportunity to become king, and he said no. What was the point of fighting for what we just did, just to become what we fought against? Um, so I think, the Greeks definitely, the Romans, believe it or
Yes.
not, early on they were very democratic as well. They had their own senate that had a lot of power. It wasn't always a dictatorship there, but after Caesar took power, that it became a dictatorship.
Yep.
But yeah, that's where it kind of stems from, the Greeks, I would say, and the Romans. And
Yeah, the Greek. I would just say that democracy would come from the Greeks, as far as the majority, the minority, things like that. Now, our democratic system, I mean, that it takes time, just like anything else. I mean, philosophy, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and all those great philosophers that came out of Greece were also big into their government as well. So one of the things I want to point out is that, I mean, that it was in its infancy with the Greeks. The Greeks were the ones to really bring it out, and it was the start of that developed in which where we are today in human government, throughout some of the different society and empires that sprung up after that. But the idea that I want to come across, the point I want to make today, is that culture will precede you. So your culture will make a lasting impression on another culture. So you ever heard of the phrase a culture collide or a culture shock, when you go somewhere different and you have to adjust to the culture, the way of life there, and really
Yeah.
that's what culture is. And what I'm trying to speak to people is that your group of people, wherever you're from, whoever you are, your group of people, whether you're Spanish, you're Puerto Rican, you're Cape Verdean, you're African, English, whatever, your culture will precede you. And what that means is if you go somewhere where there isn't many English people, you go somewhere that's somewhere different, they're going to have an idea of what that culture is like based off of what that culture has presented or what that group of people has presented to the world. And that's what that's the point I want to say is that you need to create a culture within your own community, within your own neighborhoods, within your own group of people that is pleasant to the rest of the world, that shines a good light instead of a bad one. And of course, just like anything else, we have negatives and positive with things of that nature. But we want our culture, and at least my own people, I would want my culture to be something that's well presented to the world. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Maybe you want to point something out. Maybe you guys want to elaborate. Maybe Evo or Matt, you could say a few things on this subject.
I feel like the U.S. is a melting pot. We have tons of cultures that come here and they clash, if you would, not in a bad way, but we try to melt them all in. But I do feel, on the other hand, though, that the actual American heritage and culture is slowly getting lost in the realm of things. That's how I feel about
In what
it.
way? In what way? What do you mean?
I just feel like for example, when you look at immigration, there used to be a time where they would assimilate people that came here, but that's no longer the case with the open borders and how the left-leaning people in politics are just pretty much letting everybody in here. And you also look at the fact that a lot of these liberal professors and these liberal agendas are trying to get rid of, or trying to make it seem like our culture had always been evil to begin with. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, to jump on that, you could say, like, there's a lot of people now that would say, like, forcing immigrants to learn English
Yeah.
or to learn American history is racist or discriminatory against them. And to me, that should be mandatory. You should want to learn about the country that you're supposedly wanting to live in and build a life in. If I was to move to Portugal, I should learn the Portuguese language. I shouldn't be expecting other cultures, other people to learn my language in order for me to get by. I shouldn't be expecting the Portuguese government to give me my basic necessities. Maybe they can help me for a limited time, but ultimately I should be learning the Portuguese culture. I should be learning the language. I should be learning how to get around on my own. I should take pride in the Portuguese history and learn about it. And if that's going to be the country that I choose to live in, then I should assimilate to that type of culture. Doesn't mean that I have to eliminate what I came from, but if that country is good enough to live in, it should be at least good enough to assimilate in, if that makes sense. And I feel we should be doing the same. What made us so great in the past was that people wanted to come to America and they wanted to assimilate. Now you have certain groups of people that they come to America and they want us to cater to them. They want us to make sure that we're putting up signs so that their language is accommodated. And I'm not just talking about Spanish. There are lots of Muslim cultures that come over here as well, and they don't want to assimilate. So in that sense, I would agree that we're trying to erase the American culture. And not only that, you see that on the college campuses where they're trying to destroy history of our nation, pulling down statues and things like that. And that's all an attack on American history. That's all an agenda to again, like Evaldo said, to say that the Americans were evil.
Yeah.
And you would think that something like that is coming from outside forces, but it's surprisingly coming from those within our own nation.
Yeah.
Sad to say, but it's true. And I mean, even if you look into some of the cultures here that are big, one of the big things that you said before is that racist. We have a culture that's so racially motivated in so many aspects as far as the way in which we have politics, and identity politics is one big way in which race plays into a lot of the things that kind of dictates our culture in some ways, you know? I mean, I think that's sad that we as a culture and as a nation can label almost anything racist based off of how we feel. And I feel like the American culture, like many people are saying now, is not only being erased, but I think people are getting soft, man. People are real soft nowadays.
I agree with that.
People are really sensitive and so soft that they can't. There's no room for jokes. There's no room for there's no room for sarcasm really anymore, and everything could be taken as offensive or racist or sexist or all that. And it's unfortunate. And really, what that does, I believe, is it narrows thinking. People can't think for themselves. Think people can't have their own train of thought. It's unfortunate, but I mean, maybe you can add on that. I think because we've screwed the lines so much, and now everybody takes offense to so much, people can't have. They don't have the ability, or they can't. They're not able to think for themselves. In many cases, especially on a college campus and in a public school setting, where the left liberal agenda is just so prevalent. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, and really, that's all culture. That's all culture because it wasn't. If we go back years ago, if not even years, if we go back 60 years, 70 years ago, it wasn't that way. I mean, I can remember my pastor getting up and saying that in his class they would actually read a portion of the Bible and say a prayer before they started class. That was in a public school in the United States of America.
Yeah, I would say back in the day it was so because the American heritage and culture was stronger. Even if you came from another country, you first became an American, and we all shared the same values. And now we're going away from that, and wherever you've come from, that's the culture you're trying to be like here.
Right.
And that what that does is it causes everybody to be racially sensitive because we're focusing on where we're from instead of where we are now and us being Americans.
I always found it funny. You have all these immigrants that are coming from these poor, war-torn countries or whatever, or cartel-controlled countries, and people are like, let them in because of the conditions that they're in. But once they finally get here, they're so proud to wave the flags of the nations that they came from. They're so proud of that culture that they came from. I don't know if I was in that position where I'm leaving a country, it's probably because that country is not so great. So if I'm gonna come from a nation that's not so great into the United States, then I'm gonna want to adopt that culture, that flag. I am not gonna be waving the flag of the nation I just abandoned. Because I said that it was so horrible. If it's so horrible, why are you waving those flags?
Yeah.
Come into the United States. I'm not saying, again, you don't have to erase away your past, but don't expect other people to bow down to your culture, or don't expect your culture to come over here and dictate how this nation is going to be run or how it should be run. I just don't feel that's how it works or how it should work.
Yeah.
To kind of piggyback on you, Deshaun, I think not only is joking, but even just talking the truth will get people offended. And that's because they don't want to take accountability for the reason why certain cultures behave badly. As the only white guy here, I don't want to be the first to say that there are certain cultures in this country when disaster strikes, there's certain groups of people where they'll be looting Walmarts and things like that, and
Yeah.
you don't really see that from some other cultures. I'll give you an example. In Japan, when they had that huge tsunami and the nuclear power plant went haywire, you didn't have Japanese people looting in the streets. They were helping one another. It's a huge cultural difference over there. Yes, you always have those few people, but it's nothing like you would see over here. When there's a hurricane here, you got flocks of people that are looting stores, looting people's homes. And then in Japan, people were not robbing banks. People were not breaking down shop windows. They were helping their community. So it does show the cultural differences.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and just like you said before, those are so crazy. Because when I think about it, I think of places where riots have occurred. So I mean, I would think of like places like where injustices have occurred. Instead of actually building up the community and trying to better it, they're destroying it. And I mean,
Right.
unfortunate things happen. Okay, people, this is life. Some bad things are gonna happen. Some unfortunate, unfair things are gonna happen.
And I'm not talking about like an injustice where, something crazy happens
Yeah.
and it causes people to get angry. I'm just talking about a natural disaster that
Yeah.
happens. And for some reason in the middle of a hurricane, there's certain people that feel like that they need to go rob a 40-inch TV.
Yeah, but
You know,
but I just wanted to add because I think you're onto something there. I really feel like not only with that, I feel like that's a nicer way to put it, but just to even go at certain groups of people. And I want to talk about the black people for a second, as far as black culture in America, is that you have people in the black community like Matt. I don't want to. I'm saying this. Matt's not saying this, but you have certain groups of people like this one where if something happens that's unjust to their group of people is they take it out on everybody else by destroying their communities and ridding their communities like the Watts riots and things like that, and they will justify their violence based off of an injustice, which I don't think is I mean you can't really justify violence on your own community, regardless. I mean you can't. I mean, and not only the black culture, but even the white culture. You have
yeah.
people who in the white culture they destroy their communities based off of jealousy, adultery, and things of that
Or
nature.
just the fact that President Trump won an election, you got the Antifa people, which are probably mainly white people, anyways,
Yeah,
and they're destroying their own community, which makes no sense. So you're from a liberal city, and you're going and you're destroying liberal businesses.
yeah,
So I don't know what you're trying to achieve. It's just anarchy, just people who don't
anarchy.
care
Yep.
about authority, uh, about anybody that's gonna have order. You know, Antifa. I don't care what anybody says. They're a homegrown terrorist group.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I don't really. I just point out the black culture because it's evident in the United States. I mean, we're so racially divided in many cases because of the black movement and the black movements that have sprung up because of all of the injustices and things of that nature, which is one of the mainstream topics here in America
Yeah,
as far as racial or social justice warriors. The black community seems to be one of the biggest pushers for that. So that's reasons why I'm coming towards them right now and really talking to them. But there are other groups as well, the Hispanic groups, the English groups, and things of that nature. They all have their vices as well. It's not just the black community, but I wanted to say that because it's prevalent. You know what I mean? And culture really does dictate a lot of the things in our society that are good and bad. Like I remember playing basketball for my high school and walking into a private school, and one of the biggest things there was a culture that was very all about manners. People said sir, thank you, you're welcome, can I help you, have a great day. Just very small things, you know what I mean, that really can affect everything else. And it really did shine a light on the way in which they lived every day to day things there at their school. So I kind of adopted that in many cases. I liked it, not only from my church, but from seeing people in different school settings have manners and talk to people and use sir and ma'am and yes and no and things of that nature, and which can really have a lasting impression and an effect not only on the people who are attending that school but the people who come in contact with that. So really culture can set the tone for your society, your town, your neighborhood, and like that. So I feel like if we would talk more about culture and how we can fix and get into some of these negative things that are infecting our society within the culture, I think that we'll have a bigger chance of actually solving some of the problems that we talk about in politics every day. I mean, what do you think? What do you guys think about that?
But I want to touch base on what Matt said about looting. Matt's talking specifically about the one of the latest hurricanes we had. There were a group of black people. I forget what city or state it was in. I want
Yep.
to say Louisiana or something. I'm not quite sure. But they were caught by the officials in the police department looting a Family Dollar or a Walmart or something. They were destroying it, going in there, stealing stuff. And when the authorities had called in dispatch to ask what they should do, they were told to stand down. Why is that? Because they were afraid of being racially insensitive or being racist because these were black people or black kids doing it. And with all the controversy that's going on with the so-called black community and the police department, they didn't want to cause anything more inflammatory because they were afraid of holding them accountable so it wouldn't cause anything inflammatory. So that's what's going on here. The blacks aren't being held accountable because of the racial sensitivity that's going on in our culture,
Yeah.
and that's bad.
It's unfortunate because even it's like people struggle to even talk about this, especially because I know some of us we don't want to be I don't want to sit here and be like I'm targeting the black community, but really what I'm saying is that it's the popular thing. It's the
Started
social.
with them. It started with them. Black people have always been, whatever liberal agenda there is, black people have always been the foot soldiers of running that liberal agenda. Because all of this stuff started. They're always used, and they don't even realize it. So, for example, like the civil rights movement, they hopped on racism. They started calling that racist and had them, march and do all that stuff. And what that did was, instead of actually helping the black community in the right way, they came in and they started giving them stuff, and then started to make them feel like victims. You're a victim of racism and slavery, and then they started giving them a fake culture, like, oh, you all came here from Africa, we stole you. So black people have always felt disenfranchised and not a part of this nation. So now it causes them to just always hate this country, hate the police. They just go in a anger tantrum. And they were never like that. They were actually good back then. They were moral. They were decent. They loved this country. But now their whole culture has changed. And it's because it started, like, this whole thing, this whole liberal agenda started with them. And now you see the liberals moving on to, like, immigrants that are coming in here, making them feel disenfranchised, and other groups of people like the LGBT community, making them feel disenfranchised. So in the midst of all this, we're just losing our culture of what it is to be an American. We're all just becoming victims. And then while we're becoming victims, the left-leaning folks are getting into more and more power by using us. But it started with the black community. That's why they're worse off than everybody else. I'm not saying whites aren't, like, bad or more immoral.
Yeah.
But the blacks are the most because it started with them. They got affected and hit by it the most.
So where we at for time right now? What we looking at right now for time?
At 35 minutes.
35 minutes. We're at the 35-minute mark.
Yeah.
So I mean, we could go on for days about some of these topics, but I want to touch on this. I mean, the epidemic, as far as the opioid epidemic in America, is certainly permeating the culture, not only with young people, but we got people in places of power. It's this epidemic, as far as the opioid epidemic, is permeating every layer of society. Okay, and how this relates to our culture in America is because we have a culture of drug seekers, drug pushers, drug culture with our youth in America, which is just absolutely sad. And why this is a part of the culture is because we've got people who are now being given psych drugs for how they feel. Not only for people who are LGBTQ, transgender people, just for the maybe the day-to-day depression or something, maybe a bad feeling or something like that. So we're pilling up our kids, we're pilling up people based off of feelings and things of that nature.
Yeah.
We're declining as a nation based off of the fact that we can't handle everyday life.
Right. People can no longer have the ability to problem solve on their own. They look to others.
Yeah.
They look for meds. They look for easy way outs because we're becoming, like you said earlier, a soft nation.
Yeah, we're weakening. People are so sensitive. It's unfortunate. And the culture in which America we live in today hasn't always been that. We've been a hard-working, dedicated, and beyond most, a very, very, very in touch with God nation, in which we've printed on our money, we put it on our federal buildings. We're a nation under God, and we're a nation that has thrived off the fact that we've adopted those Judeo-Christian values that have allowed the nation to continuously grow. I mean, if you talk to Matt here, Matt can give you a history lesson based off of all the Christian values and some of the presidents here in the United States that have. I'm not saying they've all been outstanding people, but what I mean is that their principles were in order.
Right, and the vast majority of our presidents have recognized the importance of, a higher being or the Christian values and why it made our nation so successful. But honestly, I think when we look at the underlying problems of a lot of the issues within the American culture, is a lot of it has to do with the victimhood mentality.
Yeah.
No culture has never been able to overcome a victimhood mentality. It's only been those groups of people that have said, "Hey, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm gonna, yeah, my situation may be bad, but I'm going to look to the future to make things better." You look at the Jewish people; they've been conquered many times. They've gone through many genocides, many of which are not put in history books. Almost every nation has had their form of genocide against the Jewish people, even in so-called Christian nations. But you see that there are people that always prospers. Why? Because they're not willing to be a victim, and that's the same mentality that Black people need to have, and also whites. Because honestly, living in Fall River and in New Bedford, it's not just the Black community. It's white people that are also allowing their families to become broken and immoral, and it's having a major impact on this nation that cannot be sustained.
Yeah, the family unit is being torn down, and that's a very important part of society and culture. If one is to remain strong, you got to have a strong family unit.
Yep. To destroy the family is to destroy a nation.
Oh man, you guys hit the nail on the head, man. It's unfortunate, but I come from a dysfunctional, broken home as well. Just throw my experience out there, and it's not good. Kids are confused. They don't know what's going on. They're not liking their circumstance and things of that nature. So I can assure you, America, that a dysfunctional household is not going to brood a real good culture for your group of people.
Yeah.
So
And I think the reason why we have a lot of the problems that we have is because parents, or the lack of parents, has forced our school systems to teach a lot of these kids. And it was never their job to teach your kid to be disciplined, or to teach your kid to be uh, a positive influence in society. It was never their job. And unfortunately, I think parents have been absent. They've allowed television and Hollywood to teach their kids, and also the school systems.
And it starts by getting rid of the men, weakening the men, getting them out of the household, and things like that.
making men more feminine too.
Gillette had a nice anti-men ad recently. They're going away from manhood.
Yeah, I guess they don't like money either, because I've already switched to a different brand, Harry's. Yeah, I use their razors now. I used to only use Gillette's, but I use Harry's now since they want to pander to people that don't even buy their products anyway.
I think with the world we're getting into now, we won't be able to buy anything, man. Because man, I tell you what, one of the things I can tell you is that a lot of things are getting politicized, and even Matt said it before. He was like, "Man, video games, you can't even play some video games without there being some kind of liberal
Yeah,
agenda
you
behind
can.
it."
One of the biggest scandals was a World War II game that came out
Yep.
called Battlefield 5. And essentially, what they wanted to do is they wanted to replace men with women in a war in a scenario in which the vast majority of casualties in that war were all men. Yes, there were some women that partake in the war, but here was a company that was just trying to push a feminist agenda. Yeah, you can, if you're playing a multiplayer game, allow women, whatever. I don't care, but don't change the history to feed your agenda. And that's why you got the poor sales that you got.
Oh yeah.
But that's just a snippet of what these companies are trying to do. They're politicizing games as well.
Oh man, and you go to things that we wish we could get away from some of these political things, but unfortunately, it's starting to permeate every.
Yeah, games is
aspect.
supposed to be a form of escape, and it's sad to see, all those men that sacrificed, and then we have to feel the need to change history to please a certain agenda. You want to have a war game with all women? Then make a war game in the future with all women. There you go. Problem solved. You don't need to change history.
Oh man.
Well, if you look at like the WNBA, that's a basketball association with all women, and they're not even doing well. They're asking for more money, and they want to be paid as much as men, but financially they're not doing so well. Because let's be honest, people rather see men that are more athletic play basketball than women.
Yeah.
But me saying this right now, this is me. I would be called a misogynist or whatever.
Right. But if you don't have the funds to pay your players, that's not the fault of me or you. That's It is what it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's crazy because you have now like transgender transgenders competing in sports now, and just that itself is politics because it's like
Yeah.
you're biologically either a man or a woman, and you trying to compete in sports of the opposite sex in which you were born.
Right. It's really not fair to the female competitors.
No, it's not fair. It's like the male. It's like the transgender who was wrestling girls. It's like, dude.
Yeah. I mean, even Hollywood's trying to prop up this whole pumping up women. The recent Ocean's 11 movie with all women there. Sandra
Or
Bullock was in there.
the Ghostbusters
Didn't
movie
even
too.
do good. Didn't even do good as much. It didn't do as well as the regular Ocean's
It
11.
did the same thing. That's what happens when you're forcing women
Yeah.
into roles. You want to create an action star? I'll give you an example. One of my favorite video games is a game called Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
It features a female lead character.
Yeah.
I have no problem with that. In fact, I would probably be upset if they replaced that character
Yeah.
because it's a good character. I don't believe in just changing established characters to fit an agenda, and that's what they did with that movie that you mentioned. That's what they did with Ghostbusters, and
Right.
as soon as that movie bombed, what was the first thing that they said? Oh, it's because it was all women. Well, no, it was because you changed an established story, an established lore, to fit an agenda that nobody wanted.
Yeah.
Don't mess with the order of things. Don't mess with the order of the household as well. This is what happens.
Yeah.
Things begin to go wrong.
If you're gonna make James Bond movie, I want my James Bond to be a white, awesome
Exactly.
James Bond guy.
Yeah.
If you want to make another movie with the lead black character, go for it. But don't change established lore.
And Matt, just to be balanced here,
Bro,
if you want to make a Shaft, I want my Shaft guy to be a black, nice looking, strong guy. Don't make him a white guy because
Exactly.
he's always been a black guy.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Don't make Batman Mexican. Don't make him gay. He's a white man. If you want to make another superhero go for it. Make him better.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely with. I like the new the new cartoon. I'm not gonna lie. The Spider-Man into the Spideyverse with Miles Morales, which is Black Spider-Man. But I mean, it was all about a universal thing. But I will say, I thought that was cool. I thought that was dope. I'm not saying that we can't. You can't change these characters. I mean, I might disagree with them in that way. I think you can change them if you want
No,
to see a
don't-
black Batman.
Don't
Go ahead.
It
don't
won't-
change
you-
established lore.
you can, but it
Create
won't
a-
do as well.
Established law.
It won't do
He
as
says
well.
this is established,
It
bro.
won't
This is
do-
written in
it
stone.
won't do as
No,
well.
because if I've got a book that I like and the male character is black, then I want him to stay black.
Yeah,
I don't want
Yeah.
him to change. I don't want him to change to
I
be
see what
white
you
just to make me feel happy inside. No, that's the character that he was originally designed
speaking
to
of
be.
James Bond, didn't they try to cast him with that black British guy? Remember
Yes.
that guy?
Yes.
He never got casted.
I've heard two things. I heard one that they wanted to make him gay, and then
Yeah.
a one where I think they wanted him to be black.
When I think of all the James Bond characters, and I don't watch James Bond movies now, but they've
Yeah,
all
neither do
been
I.
the
I just use
same-
it as an example.
But they've all been this. I've always had the same image of who James Bond
Yep.
is to me. It's just a white British guy that's a spy.
Right.
That's it.
Oh yeah, of course. And I mean, just like you guys said before, I mean, we live in a culture that's so polarized and so sensitive, so soft, that we have a generation of kids growing up that are just going along about feelings, man, about how they feel and not actual facts.
I got
and
another
actual-
example. When I used to watch The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, they had two Aunt Vivs. I've always been more close to the first Aunt Viv. When the second Aunt Viv came, Will Smith's aunt, I don't know. It kind of just made me feel like I didn't really like it as much. I liked the original Aunt Viv.
Who was the original Aunt Viv?
She was the skinny, taller black lady.
Yeah.
Instead of the shorter, a little bit heavier set black lady.
Now, how would you feel if they remade Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but it was all white people?
Oh,
Exactly.
nah.
Well, they remade like Full House now, right?
You
They
can't do
remade
that.
that. They made it Fuller House. I don't like that. I like the original Full House with the original cast members. All right, that's what I like.
Yeah.
You know,
Keep it the same. It's established law.
It
Yo,
is.
I like how he said it's established law.
don't-
Batman's white. It's it, dude.
I will say this though: the only movie that I liked that they
I like
redid
it.
was actually the second Karate Kid with Jaden Smith.
Oh,
Will
I didn't
Smith's
like
son.
that movie.
I
dude.
actually liked that. I liked it in one sense because the the karate was actually better than the original Karate Kid.
Well, yeah, it's
The
just
original
better
Karate
effects.
Kid was like awful. Like you couldn't win in a fight the way he was fighting.
I mean, I like Jackie
like a
Chan, but you know,
You like Jackie Chan?
I like Jackie Chan in
Yeah.
that movie.
Well, we want to thank everybody for tuning in. I think we're going to wrap this up here, going on 50 minutes. And I just want everybody to know that culture is going to precede you. So I want us Americans, if you're listening to this podcast and you're somebody who is not with the sensitive, soft culture in which we live in today and really wants to hear something truthful, something factual, something that's based in things that are of old and really still matter today, I want us to look towards being Americans and being Americans first before we look towards our heritage and our racial standing in the United States. And let's stop being victims, but let's be victors. Go and like us on Facebook, The Politically Incorrect Podcast on Facebook. Go and like our Instagram page at The Politically Incorrect Podcast on Instagram. Links in my bio. Deshaun Barros on Instagram. And go and follow us on Twitter too. We got a Twitter page. It's The Politically wait a minute, I can't even remember what I put for the Twitter right now, dude. It's like slipping my mind. But
It's kind of new, so we'll hold off on it for now.
it's new. Yeah, is there anything go and like and subscribe us on YouTube. We're on
Yes.
YouTube. We need support. We need subscribers.
100 likes.
And I've been telling my co-hosts I want to go visual, so be looking out for that. We're gonna be doing that soon. It might not be in the next couple episodes, but we'll definitely be going visual. You'll be able to see who it is talking and telling you about some of the things and some of the viewpoints we've got going on here. So thank you for tuning in. Have a great Father's Day, and happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there and all the real fathers out there, all the real men out there stepping up for their families and taking care of their families. Any last words you guys want to say before
Happy
we
Father's Day, everybody. We'll see you guys next week.
Happy Father's Day, and we'll see you next Monday.
bye-bye?